Hi, my name is Emily Ayinelli, and I am male to female transgender. Um, I'm proud of that because that's what I am. I'm a transgender girl, and I've always known since I was little, since the age of 3, I knew that there was something different about me. Boys don't usually wear dresses, that I know. But I wasn't really a boy. Not many people know what it's like to wear clothes or to be kind of relegated to a situation that just isn't what you are all about. I know that things are not always the way we have envisioned them to be. I'd be the first one to tell you that I've been struggling pretty much with my gender since a very early age. I didn't know actually what was going on with me, but I can tell you that I knew I was very different. I couldn't talk about it though. I lived in denial. I hid it from people. Essentially, I was afraid. First, I was afraid of being caught when I would sneak into my sister's closet or her clothing drawer. I was afraid that someone, specifically my mom and my sister and my dad, would catch me. I lived in secret pretty much my whole life. I remember many a times going to sleep under the covers with a girl's dress on, sneaking it. That was really my sense of happiness, my sense of who I was. And those were the only times that I could feel that good about myself. When I was dressed in boys' clothes or men's clothes, I didn't feel good about myself. I was miserable. I was unhappy. I was pretending. I wanted to live the right life. I wanted to do the things that I was supposed to do. That's why I never really talked about it. I just accepted what it was. That I was different. That the only times that I could really enjoy dressing in girls' clothes was in secret. Now that is not a good thing. It's not good or healthy, to be honest with you. But I grew up in a different generation than the kids growing up today. And when I grew up, you didn't hear much about transgender, or it was kind of like nobody really knew much about it. I only knew the very first time that I came to learn about not transgender so much, actually transsexual, was Dr. Renee Richards. She was pretty much one of my heroes. If you aren't familiar with Dr. Renee Richards, she was famous in the 70s for playing tennis. There was controversy because she wanted to play on the women's circuit. The problem was that initially it was fought against because she had sex change operation. That's what they used to call it back then. Now it's more, the more preferred terminology is sex reassignment surgery or gender reassignment surgery or gender confirming surgery. Back then it was simply a sex change operation. Sounds very dramatic and quite curious. So I was very interested in learning how she became a woman. She was originally born Richard Raskin. She married as a man and had a son and was a professional tennis player as Richard Raskin. But she came to know that she was transsexual and she had surgery. She took hormones, obviously, and then she did surgery. And she was also a very well-known ophthalmologist, I believe, an eye doctor, eye surgeon. I'm not sure if she still practices, but I know she's still alive. And I also came to know of a model who is also a transsexual. Actually, I'm friends with her on Facebook. Caroline Kasi, also known as Tula, a model. And I read her book, and I was very drawn to her. She actually had a big influence on my life. I knew by reading about Dr. Renee Richards and Caroline Kasi that I was definitely identified as a woman. What do they say? A woman trapped in a man's body. That's what I knew I was. I knew from an early age too. I knew since the age of 13 that I was different, but I started dressing in girls' clothes since the age of 3. The problem was that I couldn't express my feelings, so I denied them. I repressed them. I couldn't be my true self. And I suffered from that. Very painful. No one can understand the gravity of living life where you feel trapped. That your mind tells you one thing, but your body tells you another, and the two are not consistent. I was at odds with my body. My mind told me I was a girl, but my body told me I was a boy. And I couldn't reconcile the two. So what did I do? I just tried to do the best I could as a boy. I tried to deny the girl in me. I repressed her. I tried to get rid of her. And I did it through my actions. Over time, I had accumulated girls' clothes. And I thought the only way I could stop my feelings of wanting to live as a girl after accumulating an amount of clothes that pretty much was my money spent from side jobs. I thought innocently enough that if I got rid of the clothes, that I would stop feeling the way I do. But the problem is, my feelings were the same. I always felt like a girl, no matter what I did. I purged, meaning I got rid of my clothes, thinking that was the answer, only to find out later that I went back and started buying again. It was a cycle. Buy girls' clothes, have the time when I can to wear them, enjoy them, fantasize about being a girl, especially when I'm in my dresses and my girl bathing suits and girl jeans and blouses. And then, for whatever reasons, purging the clothes, getting rid of them, giving them away. I gave them away to charity, which was good. But I was heartbroken later that I was missing them. Not that I gave them away for charity, that was a good, noble thing. But that I bought such nice clothes, especially female clothes, only to get rid of them later. It just made no sense. And after purging probably about a dozen times, I finally realized that's not the answer. And my initial take on what I was going through was trying to rationalize that I was simply cross-dressing, that I was a heterosexual male who enjoyed wearing women's clothes. That seemed logical, and I just accepted that. And I did male things, I was very good with my schoolwork. Women are too, girls. I focused on my math and sciences. I was good in sports. I played baseball as a child, and I played baseball pickup games with friends, and I ran cross country and track. And I enjoyed sports. I enjoyed being on a team with guys, but inside I didn't feel like one of the guys. There was always something pulling me to the other side. I always felt more feminine than ever. I never felt masculine. I pretended, and I got away with it. Sometimes I wonder how. I couldn't leave clues because I was so afraid to be found out. So for some reason, my fear allowed me to pass through that difficult time and pass myself off as a guy. I was able to pull off the charade because I was so afraid of being found out, afraid of being laughed at, afraid of being bullied. So I couldn't live the life that I knew inside I was supposed to. Now, it's very complicated, gender identity. You know, people don't really understand. A lot of people kind of mix gender identity with sexual attraction. You can't equate gender identity with sexual attraction. They're two different things. Sexual attraction is where two people come together and are attracted to each other, whether they're male or female, to another male or female. But gender identity is what you feel inside of you, what beats within your heart. And what beats within my heart was always that I was a girl. I've known that since I could crawl, basically. I wanted to wear girls' clothes all the time. I wanted to grow my hair. I wanted to wear makeup. I wanted to do nails. I wanted to have dolls. But I was grown up in early 60s in Brooklyn, and I had, the typical boy childhood. I grew up with Matchbox cars and Hot Wheels, and I grew up with Super Pinky, the punch ball. We used to play stoop ball. I had a Rawlings mitt. I played baseball. I had a Louisville Slugger baseball bat. I remember when my dad would get me a baseball mitt, he would put the baseball in the mitt and he would wrap it up in tape so the mitt would be perfectly creased, so it would be easier for me to make a catch. I remember G.I. Joe dolls. I remember growing up during the space age, so I got a G.I. Joe astronaut set. I remember my first bicycle. I grew up during a tough time. Grew up in the 60s. I was born during the presidential inauguration of John F. Kennedy. I was just a baby when he tragically was assassinated. I learned about Robert Kennedy's assassination and Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination. It was a wild time. I grew up during the Beatles. I remember seeing them on the Ed Sullivan Show. So I was influenced by a lot of things. But during those times, I was also living my secret, living as a female, a girl. But that was secret. And it was killing me. And I never talked to anybody. I kept it a secret. You know how many years before I finally had to talk about it? It was not until, and I believe that my mother knew something was going on, because I used to order girls' bathing suits to a mail order catalog and dresses. Now, my mom was sick. She suffered through a lot of depression. She was paranoid and she had schizophrenia. She was a wonderful mom. God bless her. God rest her soul. But she was too fragile in her mind for me to open up about my own gender situation. So I never told her. But deep down, I believe she must have known, because when I was a little boy growing up, I remember sneaking into my sister's cosmetics drawer and getting some of her nail polish. And I remember putting it on my nails, and my mom and sister asked me why was I wearing nail polish. And they took it away from me and said, don't ever do that again. So that kind of scared me, because they said boys don't do that. So I was brought up with this barrier that since I was born a boy, I couldn't do girl things, and that hurt me deeply. But growing up as a young adult, now my mom died tragically. She was only 50 when she died. So I was 29, a young man, so to speak. But before that tragedy, probably when I was in my early 20s, when I was working and going to college still, I had part-time jobs. So I would go to the mall and I would buy one of the most inexpensive dresses I could get that I enjoyed. Or I would order, because usually in the mail order I didn't have to pay sales tax, so I would save money. I would order a girl's bathing suit and a dress, and I used to order from Avon Fashions when it was called that. And then it changed to Newport News. I think they're still around. And Venus Swimwear. And Victoria's Secret, of course. And so many different catalogs. Even Spiegel. And I would order it through the mail, and my mom would say, what is this? Why are you ordering this? And one time she actually opened up one of my packages, and she said, what is this? You got a dress? Why are you wearing a dress? Well, she didn't say, why are you wearing a dress? She said, why are you buying a dress? And I pretended, I don't know, I don't even remember what I said. I just tried to shrug it off. But we didn't really talk about it. And she even took it from me. She said, I don't want you wearing that. So she hid it on me. Luckily, I found it under her bed. And I was able to reacquire it. And she must have known, but she didn't say anything. And we just left it at that. I didn't want to upset my mom, but I kind of feel she knew. Even though I never told her directly. and she never confronted me about it. I miss my mom. She was a good mom, strong woman. Sad how she died. My dad was a good man, good father, very devoted to his family. I grew up with 2 sisters, my mom and my dad. They had a good marriage, but it was definitely a struggle for them at times. My dad worked in the ironworks. He did very difficult work, and he saw death in his business, which affected him mentally. And to escape the pressures of his jobs, he resorted to drinking, which kind of affected him and the family, especially my mom, and affected us as well. I was the oldest. I have my 2 sisters. It's just me and my 2 sisters now. Both my mom and dad are gone. And my dad worked hard, supported the family. Then, after I was ready to go to college, graduating high school, where I focused on my math and sciences, and I ran cross country and track. I was really lucky that I fell into sports to begin with, because I wanted to play baseball and I was crushed when I didn't make the cut. And luckily, I think things are meant to happen for a reason. I had a coach, not a coach at that time, but a soon-to-be coach, who actually recruited me in an odd way. I think I told this story before, but it's a good story. I was really depressed. I was going through a lot of emotional stuff. My mom was in the hospital. She had a breakdown. I was going through my own problems and my gender situation. And my dad was drinking because of his pressure at work. And he was playing the role of mom and dad for me and my 2 sisters, because mom was in the hospital. And I was just getting overwhelmed. I was getting near the age where I had to think about what my future was going to be. My mom was sick. My dad was going through his own problems. I was the oldest, and I was kind of not sure what I was going to do. Plus, I was battling with my inner gender identity. And one day I was considering I don't know how to say it. Let's just say I wanted to sleep and not wake up anymore. And I was planning to do that. And I knew how. I was going to take literally 50 or more aspirin. And I would pray that that would put me to sleep permanently. I get emotional when I think about it. But I planned to do it on the weekend. I wanted to finish the school week. I don't know why. Guess it was meant to be. And on the Friday before the weekend, when I was on the lunch line, one of the teachers came up to me. His name is Al Bukowski, great man. I didn't know it at the time, but he was a math teacher, very highly respected, and a coach. He said to me, I want you to run for me. And I said, I don't run. He said, I don't care. I want you to run for my cross-country team. Are you up to the challenge? And I said, yeah, I will do that, whatever it takes. And by him coming up to me and asking me to be a part of his cross-country team was truly a miracle, because it prevented me from doing what I had thought about, which was to overdose on aspirin. He very well saved my life by his very actions of asking me to run for his team. And I did. I wasn't a varsity runner, but I ran for his team, and I said to him that I will do my best, and that's what I did. I ran my best. I won medals. I helped our team on the JV place, and I learned a lot. He taught me discipline. He taught me courage. He taught me I could do something I never knew I could. He taught me to believe in myself. It was tough for me when I lost my mom. It was very hard, and I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. She was proud of me. I graduated college. I became an accountant, a CPA. Sadly, she knew I passed the exam. She never got to see my CPA license, but she never got to see me get married. She never got to see my son born. But I believe from heaven she sees it. She sees everything. She knows. And I believe she knows about my situation. And she's proud of me. And she loves my son, her grandson, Maddie. And she loves my wife and my family. And I believe she's reunited with my dad. They both were very good to each other. They loved each other. And they brought us up very well. It was hard when I lost my mom. Like I said, I was 29. I was working. I was still living at home with my dad, and my dad was struggling. He was fighting his depression after losing his wife, my mom. He was going through battles emotionally. He was drinking. He had to work still. He had that pressure. And also, my sisters were pretty much on their own. One of my sisters was married already with a son, and she was pregnant with her second son. And my other sister was getting married. And I was still single. I'd never had a girlfriend in my whole life. Living with my dad at home, trying to figure out my life, and secretly cross-dressing. My dad was a good man. He was always there for me. Both my parents were, to help me go through college. When I went to Nassau Community College, where I studied engineering science, and then I went to Virginia Tech, studied mechanical engineering, and then Hofstra University and studied accounting. They were there. They supported me all throughout, and they were proud when I graduated. I was too. I look forward to the day when my son is able to go to school, graduate, and go to college and graduate. I want the very best for my son, like my parents wanted the very best for my two sisters and myself. Two years or so after my mom died, I wrote a letter to my two sisters and my best friend about my feelings, how I always felt like a girl, and I was struggling, and I wanted to have surgery eventually. And I sent it around Christmas time in a Christmas card to all three, pretty much the same letter to all three, with just the name of the person different, representing my two sisters, obviously, and my best friend. And I pretty much came out, but it wasn't really what I had hoped. Pretty much my coming out then was like no fanfare. My two sisters kind of just didn't discuss it. And my best friend, it was awkward initially when we first got together after I had sent that letter. And I was too afraid to talk about it. And he was kind of also, so we never discussed it. So it was a total failure, my first attempt at coming out. But I then realized I needed to do something. So I started seeking a therapist. I was around 32. I was working now for close to 6 years. 6 or 7 years. And I was still at home with my dad. And I tried to find support group, and I tried to find a therapist that I could talk to about my gender and how I felt like I wanted to be a girl. I started going for therapy, and I talked about my I guess feeling like I was trapped, and I talked about my family life and my mom's sad tragedy of going through her own mental illness and eventually succumbing to it, and my dad's struggles with alcohol and depression and his job pressure, though he was always there for us. And he went through rehab. We lived in New York, Long Island, and I remember he had to go to Rhode Island for rehab for a 30-day program. I remember we went to visit him once or twice, my two sisters and I. It was near Brown University, the treatment facility. And I told her my feelings. And we talked about a lot of things. We talked about the possibility of me meeting a girl, because I also told her I never had a girlfriend, and I was curious. I also talked about things that affected my mindset. I remember a tragic story, I think it was around 1979 or so, about a couple who just got married. It was in Long Beach, and they were driving to the reception after the church wedding. It was the bride, the groom, the best man, the bride's sister, and there was some guy who was drag racing. When the limo made the turn into the reception, they had just been married, man and wife. The car crashed into the limousine, killing the bride and the groom and best man. Initially at the scene, I believe it was the groom and the best man that died on the scene. The bride was taken to the hospital. She was still alive at the time, but she died eventually at the hospital shortly thereafter. And I spoke about that. I used to write a journal, and I wrote things like that that made me feel depressed. And it broke my heart. I also remember when I first went to a support group, driving to Connecticut on I-95 New England Expressway. I was going out for the first time dressed in women's clothes in public and going to a place where people would see me, the support group. It was a church in Connecticut. I never went to one before, a support group specifically geared for LGBT. I never really knew about LGBT, even when I was going there. And as I was driving, I came upon what looked like a cloud of dust, dirt. And as I peered through, I saw a limo, or a car that was probably the size of a limo, flipped over, and I saw the passengers scattered all over the 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 grass median, and I saw a mother cradling her baby, and I was just in total shock. It just had happened, and I came upon it, and I didn't have a cell phone at that time. So the best I could do was to go to the next exit and make a phone call, 911, and say that I saw a very bad car accident with like 7 or 8 people down, with a mom and her baby. I made the phone call. I'm sure others made the call. And I was very concerned, so I came back around. And when I came back around, I saw there were emergency people dispatched at the scene. So I felt at least they were getting the emergency there. And then I went back on the expressway and continued on to the support group. And when we introduced ourselves, I told them I didn't have a name selected yet for my female persona. So I just said my name, which is Edward Ionelli. Now I go by Emily Ionelli. Edward Donald Ionelli III is my formal name, and Emily Denise Ionelli is my transgender female name. But I said, after introducing myself, I said, excuse me, I'm just a little shaken up. I saw a very bad accident. And they said, it's okay, just take your time. And then I just said, I'm here because I feel like a girl, and I need to learn more about why. And I shed a tear. And I met nice people there. I met another transgender person who, I said, are you male to female? And the person said, no, I'm female to male. And I said, oh, I'm male to female. So the individual, I don't remember his name, but he said, oh, we're kindred spirits. And I looked it up and I said, yeah, we are. And I shook his hand and I gave him a hug. And I said, I hope I see you again. I never did, but he was a nice person. He is a nice person. And then I drove home. I was happy, at least I went. And then I got up to my house, living still with my dad. I made sure I went in the back way, and I got out of my girl clothes and changed back into boy clothes. And that was the last time I went to a support group for quite a while. First and last time for quite a while. And I told that to my therapist. And I told her I wanted to have a surgery to become a female, do hormones. But she was kind of like, maybe you should consider other options. She kind of said, there are other choices, and I said, maybe. So we discussed possibly meeting someone like nice young girl who I could bond with. Eventually, she introduced me to a Filipino girl who happens to be my wife now. We hit it off. I was afraid to tell her my situation. Eventually, we started dating after a couple of phone calls. And after 6 months, we got married. Civil service. And then she got pregnant. And I was so happy, over the moon, both my wife and I. And she even knew the sex of the baby, a boy. So I was so delighted, thrilled. We were still living with my dad, but I knew I had to get a place of my own for my family. So we had a church wedding eventually. My dad helped us before my wife was to deliver. She got an expected due date of December 25th, Christmas. And we originally was gonna do a November wedding, but then we figured, no, we can't do that. She'd be too much into her pregnancy. So we did a September wedding, September 12th. And we put together a nice wedding. My dad did. Invited 105 people, and pretty much all of them came. We had a good turnout. I did it at the Knights of Columbus in Oceanside, which was a recommendation of my brother-in-law, my youngest sister's husband, since he was a knight. And he was from Oceanside. We did a great reception. We had nice photos taken, nice video. Back then they did videos with VHS cassettes. My mother-in-law was there from the Philippines. She ultimately came to live with us. It was a nice wedding. And we were looking forward to Maddie being born. And we went to Disney World for our honeymoon. I never told my wife what was going on with me. And I figured now everything was going to be fine. You know, I was married, I had a wife, we had a baby on the way. The only thing missing was a place to live, other than living with my dad. So eventually, we had to come to the realization that my dad was going to have to sell his house. And he wanted to live without a mortgage, so he decided that he wanted to live renting. So we had to find a place. So we found a house apartment, and I was paying like $1,200 a month. I couldn't save at the time because pretty much my monies were going away to the rent and the other expenses. But my son was about 2 years old. We got our own apartment. We were living on our own. My dad was now living in an apartment in Amityville, where he used to live in Belmore. He sold the house. Now he was in Amityville, and we found a house apartment in Levittown through the help of my older sister. My middle sister, I should say. I'm the oldest. She was looking out for me. She wanted to make sure I was set up. And we were there from 2001 September through March of, or April of 2004. September. So like 2.5 years of renting, which was a lot of money. And I was lucky that I was working in a decent job. I was working in a decent job as an accountant in a CPA firm. Actually, that was to come. I had several jobs before that. Actually, the day I got married, which was the church wedding. The civil service wedding was in December, a couple of days after Christmas of 1997. The church wedding was September 12th, 1998, and Matthew, our son, was born December 8th, 1998. And we moved from the apartment in March of 2004 to the house, though I was paying for the apartment until April of 2004. And then we bought the house in Levittown, took a mortgage, 30-year, which I'm still paying. I have 15 years left. So much has happened since I bought the house. I got sick. I'm on disability. I have bipolar disorder, which runs in my family history. My son is 17, he's autistic, and we tried to provide him a loving home. I now have my wife's family from the Philippines living with us, my sister-in-law and her 3 children, young kids that are in the Levittown School District, and my brother-in-law, plus my mother-in-law, my wife, myself, and our son, Maddie. 9 people, and I'm the one pretty much bearing the burden of the mortgage and all the expenses. And I'm trying to get help. I was cross-dressing pretty much all my life, even throughout my marriage. I never told my wife. Before we moved to the new house, she caught me one night dressed in women's lingerie, and she was quite shocked. She never had a clue, and she asked me, "What's going on?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just cross-dressed. I do this because it helps me cope." She couldn't figure it out. She couldn't understand it. She was pretty much angry. I was upset because I didn't know what to do. My son was going through some problems too. He was diagnosed with autism and he had epileptic seizures, so he's on medication. So we have a lot of things going on. And, you know, truth be told, maybe I should have told my wife. But the problem was I was always afraid that if I told her, it would be hard for her to understand and she might not accept me. And I never really had a girlfriend in my life, so I didn't want to jeopardize that. So I'm just trying my best, you know, that's all I can do. Why did I do this video? I did this video because I think it's important for people that are going through what I'm going through to understand that you're not alone. I admire the young kids of today, the next generation, who have the courage and are able to tell their parents how they truly feel now. It's not such a easy thing, no matter what generation. And sadly, not every story is a happy one. But for the happy stories where, like Jazz Jennings, she's like one of my favorite young teen transgender girls. There are pretty much they all are courageous, whether they're male to female, female to male, the younger generation, for coming out early, and they have to go through a lot, bullying and teasing. And I admire the families that have a good understanding and support their children no matter what. I look up to them. And I think from me to anyone who struggles with their gender identity, that it's not an easy thing to deal with. It took me a long time. I'm still in therapy. I've gone through so many therapists. And I also am treated for bipolar depression, so I'm on lots of medication. I'm on hormone replacement therapy. I do still want to have surgery. I do want to have the sex change operation, but I now call it gender confirming surgery, or gender reassignment surgery, or sex reassignment surgery, or sex change operation. I do want that. I guess, like, what I'm trying to say is, if you feel different, you have to talk about it. You need to find someone that you can trust and let them know what's going on. I know it's hard to come out. You stand to lose a lot, especially if you're married and you have a good job. There's no guarantee that your wife, if you're male to female, is going to stick with you. There's no guarantee that your employer is going to still retain you. There's no guarantee if you have kids that they're going to accept you. You run a lot of risk, but you also have to look at how it affects you. And I think since going through my transition, that I've become much happier, even though I'm disabled in my mental state. But I believe that I am in a better, I'm much happier on female hormones and testosterone blockers. I can definitely see changes. I feel changes. I'm much happier when I see myself in a pretty dress and a hair bow and a nicer, rounder, softer face and nice boobies. It is worth it. The hardest thing is my son, trying to understand how to explain it to him, especially because he's autistic. That I'm still working on. That's a work in progress. But my son means everything to me. And I want to see him do well in life. Like my parents wanted to see me do well, and my sisters. I want the same for my son. Well, that's it for now. I dedicate this to my parents and to my son. And Maddie, if you see this video, try to understand that I'm just trying to be happy. We don't live forever, kid. So we may as well try to be our happiest. I love you. I love your mom. I love my family. I love you, kid. I want you to do the best in life. I'm not going to be here forever. And I just want you to know I love you, and I want you to find your own happiness too. Just like I need to find mine. And all of you out there, you need to seek your happiness. This is Emily signing off. Emily Denise Ionelli of T-Girl Angel.